today's class, we will learn about reduction of ecology and ecological adaptation. Now, what is meant by ecology? It is nothing but the organisms live in any habitat, their interactions the and their interactions with the physical environment. This is what is precisely ecology called as. Now, let us see how the work in ecology has been done in India and who is the father of ecology. Now, in this picture, you can see Mr. Ramdev Mishra. He is the father of ecology. Yeah, he obtained his PhD degree in ecology from Leeds University, UK, and he researched and laid the foundation for the understanding of tropical communities and their succession. And he also researched about environmental responses of plants, population, productivity, and nutrient cycling. So he has precisely done a lot of work in ecology to try to understand the relationship of the living organisms among themselves and the living organisms and the environment. And he therefore established teaching and research in ecology at the Department of Botany, Banaras, Hindi. Now, let us try to understand exact meaning of ecology. We all know that we live in a world which is highly diverse and it is very complex also. And we try to understand its complexity by investigating processes at various levels of biological organization. Now, ecology is nothing but a subject deals with the interactions among organisms and between the organism and its physical environment. So, what is ecology precisely? Nothing but one organism interacting with another organism or interaction among the organisms and their physical environment is termed as ecology. Now, ecology can be basically divided into two aspects. One is plant ecology, the other one is animal ecology. That means we can learn about plant ecology in relationship with the plants and the abiotic and biotic environment. Similarly, we can learn about ecology in relationship with the animals and its physical environment. So, basically, ecology is concerned with four levels of biological organizations. For example, organisms. First, organisms will be there, and then they are grouped to form populations. Populations grouped to form communities, and communities grouped to form the biomes. So, ecology can be understood and can be studied at different levels in the biological organization. What are the different levels of ecology which we can learn at different levels? One is organisms, they are the basic level, and then the population, then communities, and then biomes. So these are the four levels of biological organization of ecology. Organisms are adapted to their environments in terms of not only survival but also reproduction. So what does this sentence mean? It means that every organism is adapted to the environment not only for their survival but also for reproduction purpose. And we all know, to understand this sentence better, we all know that our planet Earth revolves around the sun, because of which various annual variations takes place. And these annual variations will be in the form of intensity and duration of temperature, which results in different seasons upon the Earth. Isn't it not? Now, these variations, together with annual variations in precipitation, that is rainfall, also account for the formation of major biomes upon the Earth. And because of these variations which we have just now talked about, the various biomes which are resulting because of these variations are mostly of three types. One is desert, the other one is rainforest, and the third one is tundra region. So, because of our Earth being revolving around the sun or rotating around the sun, this is causing different types of temperatures and different seasons, and these variations along with the presence or variations of precipitation is causing different or formation of major biomes, and these biomes are basically three types: desert, rainforest and tundra. Now, let us understand the different plant communities and their ecological adaptations because of the variations caused in temperature or due to precipitation. Now, while considering the various alternatives available in organisms, for coping with extremes in their environment. Some are able to respond to certain physiological adjustments, while other organisms migrate temporarily to a less stressful habitat. These responses are actually called as adaptation. So now let's understand the term adaptation. It is nothing but the ability of the organism that enables the organism to survive and reproduce in a particular habitat. So it is one of the attributes of an organism which helps it to survive and reproduce in a particular habitat. So that attribute of an organism is called as adaptation. Now, we have seen many adaptations are evolved over a long evolutionary time and they are genetically fixed in the organism. Many desert plants we have seen having thick cuticle on their leaf surfaces in order to avoid transpiration. And they also show sunken stomata in their leaves to avoid transpiration or water loss from the surface of the leaf. Now, they also show the presence of leaves in the form of spines, and the photosynthetic functions in such type of plants are taken up by the stems, which are totally flattened, and they are modified to perform the function of photosynthesis. For example, opentia. So, such adaptations we have seen in nature taking place over long evolutionary time, and all these adaptations have been genetically fixed in these living organisms. You can see the pictures of opentia here, where the flattened green stem is nothing but the photosynthetic part of the plant, which is performing the function of fixing the carbon dioxide into carbohydrates, whereas the leaves are reduced into spines in order to avoid the maximum loss of water. Now, land plants also show adaptation, or they show tolerance towards the salinities of the sea. And such type of land plants are called as halophytes. So, what are halophytes? Halophytes are nothing but the land plants which can tolerate the saltiness or the salinities of the sea. Example is rhizophora. Now, plants which grow in direct sunlight, they are called as heliophytes. For example, sunflower or helianthus. So, the plants which directly grow in sunlight, they have been given a term called as heliophytes. So, adaptation, as we have already discussed, it is nothing but an attribute of the organism which will enable the organism to reproduce as well as survive in a particular habitat. Now, plants which grow in shady places, they are also called as theophytes. Example is night blooming plant or night blooming jasmine plant called as Sistrum nocturnum. Now, following these adaptations by the living organisms for their environment, Eugene Warming, a Danish botanist, he classified the plant communities in 3 ecological groups. What are these 3 ecological groups in which the plant communities have been classified? They are hydrophytes, mesophytes, and xerophytes. What are the hydrophytes? Here, the term hydrophytes, hydro means water. So, any living organisms which survives or which grows in water is called as hydrophytes. So, here we are dealing with plants. So, plants that grow in water or in very wet places are called as hydrophytes. And these hydrophytes are further divided based upon the submergence of them into the water into 5 different categories. Now, let us deal about these 5 different categories of hydrophytes based upon the water level of water present in which they are being present. First one is free floating hydrophytes. Now, what is meant by free floating hydrophytes? Here the term itself will explain. Free floating means the hydrophytes or the plants which are freely floating on the surface of the water, they do not have any contact with the soil. So that is meant by free floating hydrophytes. That is, they float freely upon the surface of water. The example for such plants are Pistia, Lemna and Salvinia. You can see the pictures of these free floating hydrophytes. Here, Lemna and Salvinia. Now, the second type of hydrophytes are, these hydrophytes are called as rooted hydrophytes with floating leaves. What do you mean by that? That is the hydrophytes whose roots are present in the sand or the mud of the water and they have their leaves floating on the surface of the water. These roots are fixed to the substratum or the mud and they have the long petiolated leaves which float on the water surface. For example, you can see Nymphia as well as Victoria regia. So these two plants, they are having roots submerged or fixed to substratum and with floating leaves on the surface of the water. So they form the second type of hydrophytes which are called as rooted hydrophytes with floating leaves. Now the third type of hydrophytes are called as submerged suspended hydrophytes. Now the term itself says submerged means they are inside the water. Suspended hydrophytes, that is, these have contact only with water. That is, they are completely submerged but they are not rooted in the mud. So these are different from the second type of hydrophytes. Second type may we found the roots present in the mud, whereas in the third type of hydrophytes, they are completely submerged but they are not rooted into the mud. Example of such hydrophytes are Hydrilla and Utricularia. You can see the pictures. Hydrilla and Utricularia. Now the fourth type of hydrophytes are submerged and rooted hydrophytes. So what do you mean by submerged and rooted hydrophytes? The term itself says the plants are submerged in water but they are also rooted in the mud of the water. So they are completely submerged but they are attached to the substratum by their roots. For example, Vallisneria. So Vallisneria is such plant which is submerged and rooted hydrophyte. And the last one is amphibious plants. Now these plants live partly in water and partly in air. That is, they are both in water as well as upon the land and therefore they are called as amphibious plants. An example of such plants is Sagittaria, Typha and Limnophilia. You can see the pictures of all these three amphibious plants. Now let us understand, after the different types of hydrophytes we learned, what are the adaptations ecologically, how the hydrophytes are present in water and what adaptations they show morphologically as well as anatomically. Let us try to understand that. Now, let us first observe the morphological adaptations present in hydrophytes. Let's start with the roots. Now, in all the hydrophytes, since they are present in water, roots are very poor in their development and root caps are also absent. In some of the amphibious hydrophytes which we have learned, they grow both in land as well as near water. So the roots in them are developed, but they are not very highly developed, but they are slightly developed with root caps. So in plants, that is especially the hydrophytes, the root caps are replaced by root pockets in some of them. So these are the morphological adaptations of hydrophytes in concern with the roots. So roots actually, they are very poorly developed. Why they are poorly developed? Because the function of root is to absorb the water. And since these plants are present in water itself, the roots are very poorly developed in hydrophytes. Now let us see about the stem. How the stem is present in hydrophytes. In the hydrophytes, the stem is very long, slender and it is flexible because they are all water plants. You find the stem very slender. And leaves, they are very thin, they are long and ribbon shaped. You also find in some of the hydrophytes floating leaves which are very large and they are flat with their upper surfaces. Anatomically, if you see, the cuticle is totally absent in the submerged parts of the plants. It may be present in the form of very fine film. And the epidermal cell walls are very thin and they perform the function of absorption as well as assimilation and they also contain chloroplasts. And stomata are totally absent in submerged hydrophytes. So, these are the anatomical adaptations seen in the hydrophytes. Cuticle either is totally absent because they are all present inside the water And if it is present in the form of a very fine or thin film. And epidermal cells are also very thin and they perform the function of absorption, assimilation, and they also contain chloroplast. Stomata are totally absent in submerged hydrophytes. Now, let us see the TS of the hydrilla stem, which is a hydrophytic plant. You find a single layer of epidermis with a layer of hypodermis, and the complete inner part of the hypodermis is characterized by the presence of air chambers. And inside that you find endodermis, pericycle, and xylem and phloem are also seen. And these tissues, which are the air chambers, are the characteristic features of the anatomical features of hydrophytes. Now, the plants with floating leaves, the leaves are mostly epistomatous. In floating leaves, the leaves show the stomata upon the upper surface. And in all the hydrophytes, the mechanical tissues as well as the xylem are poorly developed. All hydrophytes will contain aerenchyma, as I have just shown in the TS of hydrilla stem, which helps in gaseous exchange and buoyancy. What is the role of aerenchyma or air chamber in the anatomy of the hydrophyte? They help in gaseous exchange and buoyancy. So, what do you mean by buoyancy? It is nothing but an upward force exerted by a fluid which opposes the weight of an immersed object. That is called as buoyancy. Now, let us see how the mesophytes and xerophytes are ecologically adapted. Mesophytes are nothing but the plants which grow in habitats where water is neither abundant nor scarce. That is, they are totally land plants and they have the access to water. Such plants are called as mesophytes. And the habitats which have the pore space in soil is occupied almost equally by water as well as by soil atmosphere. Such a balanced condition of water and gases is very suitable for the plant growth, and hence in mesophytic condition we find the best growth of forest and crop plants. Now, both excessive water and excessive drainage will create a large variety of situations which are adverse to plant growth, and only a few species specially adapted to such environment can grow there. Forest and crop plants are seen in mesophytic conditions. For example, crops like maize, wheat and barley, tropical and temperate forests, they are all the examples of mesophytes. You can see the pictures of all these crops, and the forest plants, they are all show the mesophytic conditions. Here's of cucurbit leaf, which is a mesophyte. You can see the leaf is very well adapted to the mesophytic conditions, has both upper epidermis as well as the lower epidermis, and the lower epidermis is inundated by the stomatal pores and it has a thick cuticle. Below the upper epidermis, you have the palisade parenchyma abundant with chloroplast, and below the palisade parenchyma is the spongy parenchyma, and this whole tissue together is called as the mesophyll tissue of the leaf. And inside this mesophyll tissue, find the presence of vascular bundles in the form of xylem and phloem. Now, coming to the xerophytes, as the definition or the word says, these plants grow in habitats which are deficient in water. So, these xerophytes are further classified into three categories based upon their adaptations. The first category is called as ephemerals. So, the xerophytes, which are mostly the drought evaders or the drought escapers, are categorized as ephemerals. And they are mostly found in arid zones, and they complete their life cycle in a very short period of about 6 to 8 weeks. Example of the ephemerals are tribulus. You can see the picture of tribulus in this slide. The second type of xerophytes are called as the succulents, and they are called as drought avoiding plants. Why are they called as drought avoiding plants? They absorb large quantities of water during the rainy season and they store them in different plant parts, usually in the form of usage. And the stored water is usually used during the dry periods. Example of the succulents are, depending upon which part of the plant body has become succulent, there are stem succulents in case of opuntia, leaf succulents in case of aloe, and root succulents in case of asparagus. So you can see three different features: opuntia, aloe, and asparagus. They are the succulent plants in which different parts of their plant body have been modified or adapted for the xerophytic conditions. The third type of xerophytes are the non-succulents. Now these are called as the true xerophytes because they are the perennial plants which can be withstanding the prolonged period of drought or scarcity of water. Example is Casuarina. So these plants, they can withstand any kind or any amount of dry period and still survive, and such type of xerophytes are called as non-succulents and they are the true xerophytes. Now let us see what are the ecological adaptations in xerophytes both morphologically and anatomically. Now let's see morphological adaptations of the xerophytes. Now since these xerophytes grow in areas where there is a lot of dryness and water scarcity, they have the very well developed root system. So the root hairs and root caps are also very well developed and they show the roots which are extensively branched and they spread over wide areas. Whereas the stem, in all the xerophytes, the stems are stunted or woody, hard and covered with thick bark, and usually the stem shows covering by a lot of hair and waxy coatings. Now in case of leaves, they are very much reduced in xerophytes. They are small, scaly, light and sometimes they are modified into spines in order to reduce the rate of transpiration or loss of water. So leaves in all xerophytes are highly reduced. So you can see the picture of T.S. of Needham leaf, which is a xerophyte. You find the leaf showing vascular bundle and upper and lower epidermis, sunken stomata, epidermis showing a very thick cuticle and presence of the thick walled epidermis, presence of mechanical tissues like collenchyma and multi-layer epidermis are the characteristic features of these xerophytes. The palisade tissue also is highly classified into palisade as well as spongy parenchyma, which constitute the mesophyll tissue of the leaf. Lower epidermis shows the stomata present, which are mostly sunken in order to avoid the loss of water. Xylem and phloem are very well developed, and both the upper and lower epidermis show the presence of cuticle. Now, if we observe the anatomical features or adaptations in xerophytes, we have already seen in the T.S. of Needham leaf that epidermis is covered with thick cuticle to reduce transpiration, and most of the xerophytes show epidermis which is multi-layered. Stomata is seen mostly in the lower epidermis of the leaf, which is hypostomatal, and mostly it is present in pits. Therefore, the stomata is called as sunken stomata. Mechanical tissues and vascular tissues are highly developed in all. So we have now in today's class we have learned about the definition of ecology. What is meant by ecology? What are the different regions because of the variations occurring in the planet Earth? The variations causing different seasons and this resulting into different biomes like the desert biome, the rainforest as well as the tundra biomes. And these are defined at different levels like organisms, populations, communities and therefore in further in the form of large biomes. Now in ecology, in totality, we have learned about the behavior of the organism among themselves as well as in relationship with the environment. Ecology can be studied in two different aspects. One is with plant ecology, the other one is with animal ecology. So as we are dealing in botany, we are learning about the plant ecology. Now in plant ecology, we will go and have a quick recap that we have learned based upon the use forming classification of the plants. We have learned about different types of plants based upon the availability of water. First one is hydrophytes, the second one is litrophytes, the third one is xerophytes. So hydrophytes are those plants which grow in water. Litrophytes are the plants which have access to water upon the land and they grow on land. And third type is the xerophytes which grow on land where there is very scanty or scarcity of water. So these are the three categories of plants, and we have seen the adaptations, both morphological as well as anatomical adaptations of these plants in relation to their environment. We found in hydrophytes, since they are always present in water, the root system is very poorly developed, stem is very slender and flexible, and leaves are ribbon shaped and thin. Whereas if you go to mesophytes, they are very highly developed root and stem system because they are total land plants and they constitute the different kinds of forests present and the crop plants present upon the earth. The third category, which is the xerophyte, we found them growing in desert plants where there is lot of scarcity of water. Now, these desert plants are adapted based upon the availability of water into different types, and the desert plants are classified further into ephemerals, succulents, and non-succulents based upon the period of their life cycle. Ephemerals are having very short, they are annual plants, they have a very short life cycle. Whereas if you go to succulents in them, you find they have the ability to adapt to the dry conditions by storing the water in different parts of their plant body. And in them, the leaves are totally reduced to minimize the loss of transpiration. And the third category is the non-succulents or the true xerophytes, which help in being present in the habitats with less amount of water and very well adapted by having a extensively developed root system, highly developed stem system, as well as the leaves are covered with multi-layered epidermis and a thick cuticle and a sunken stomata. So in this ecology class, we have learned the definition of ecology, different types of plants adapted to different environments, their morphological and anatomical features. So go through the textbook. In this chapter, you will be getting the short notes on the morphological or anatomical adaptation to your ITE, along with the very short questions which are very important. Mostly the definitions like heliophytes or the sciophytes or the halophytes. Such definitions will be asked in ITE exam. Thank you.